PowerPoint. Really excited for today's session on how to network and meet faculty. And we have two excellent faculty members here joining us for this discussion. But before we start, I just wanted to, again, share some friendly reminders that you have an action pack. We typically attach it to most emails. Our action pack has the theme and it has kind of all of the outstanding assignments. And it has some great questions. So when you're in your circle, if you're not sure where to start for some questions, you can definitely, open up the action pack and use that. We do have also our GradTrack trophy. So I think it's crazy. This is what our 5th meeting. We only have 3 more left of the semester of the GradTrack program. So our GradTrack trophy, again, you all can earn points for this, and you earn points as a team, and you can earn points for attendance at the meetings, handing in different assignments and meeting one-on-one with your mentor. And you can kind of log your meetings with your mentors through the Qualtrics link. And if you have any questions about that, definitely email Lexi. And then winning team gets something extra special, and definitely those bragging rights. And again, the team points, since there's different numbers of students in each team, every person on their GradTrack circle or team will earn points. And then points are going to be normalized per circle by the average number of points per person. So the circle with the highest overall points per person will win. So drum roll, who is currently winning? So for all of the August and September sessions, we are in a tight race between Circle 1 and Circle 11, guys. It is really is anyone's game here. So I encourage you to continue attending and handing in assignments. We do the maximum number of points you can have right now is 120. And we do have a number of students who have that. So keep up the great work, guys. It will pay off. So tonight, like I said, we're going to jump on into our faculty panel. And then I'll kind of bring us all back. We'll say thank you to our panelists, and then I'll give a quick assignment description for the next meeting and wrap up, and then we'll bump into our mentoring circles. And I will recap this after. So, and then you can leave directly from your circles at the very end. Okay, so again, I'm really excited to welcome Professor Nick Chawla and Professor Monique McLean to our GradTrack session today. And I'll do a quick bio of who our awesome faculty members are. So Professor Nick Chawla is a professor in materials engineering, and he's actually the associate head of the School of Materials Engineering here at Purdue University. And he came to Purdue in 2020, right during the pandemic, after previously serving as the founding director of the Center for 4D Material Science and a professor of material science and engineering at Arizona State University. Professor Chawla actually received his PhD in material science and engineering from University of Michigan. And then after receiving his PhD, he was a postdoctoral fellow jointly with University of Michigan and Ford Motor Company. And he also worked as a senior development engineer as well. Professor Chawla's work, his research is in the area of 4-dimensional or 4D material science, with a particular emphasis on the deformation behavior of advanced materials at bulk and small length scales. So he has very established in his field. He's co-authored close to 285 journal publications, has over 14,000 citations. So, things to work towards, and if you want to become a faculty member in your future career. He's an author of a textbook. He's, published, he's an editor, and he's also served on editorial boards. And he served on external advisory boards as well. So let's give a virtual warm welcome to Professor Nick Chawla. And then we also have Professor Monique McLean, who is an assistant professor here at Purdue University in mechanical engineering. Her background is actually in propulsion, energetic materials, and additive manufacturing. And her main research her main research focus is to advance the manufacturing science necessary to develop state-of-the-art additively manufactured energetic materials, or AMEMs. You can correct me if I'm saying that wrong, Monique. And so this really includes the understanding the role of complex multi-material geometries of combustion, mechanical performance, and implementing in situ monitoring of the manufacturing process to repeatedly create high quality AMEMs. And so she actually received her PhD here from Purdue in the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics in 2020, where she focused on using vibration-assisted printing, or VAP, to 3D print ammonium perchlorate composite propellants. So she's also previously worked as a research scientist at Oak Ridge National Labs. There she developed and applied defect detection techniques to big area additive manufacturing, BAM, of recycled composites. So again, a warm welcome to Professor Monique McLean. And with that, what I'll do is I'll kick it over to the panelists to start kind of with our first question. And that is a question of, or when, or, what do you look for, or how do you come across let's rewind. How do you look for / come across students to work in your research group? And I'm going to stop sharing. And so this is kind of a big question of how do you meet students who then come to work in your labs? So whoever wants to jump off with this question can.
Yeah, maybe I could start. And thank you, Jackie, for the wonderful introduction. And glad to see everybody here. Great to see everyone. I think there's no real single way where at least I meet students. I think that oftentimes students will email me, say in the summer or even early fall. Sometimes I'll get a recommendation from a faculty member saying, hey, I have an undergraduate who wants to do a PhD and is interested in your area. I think you should look at this person. And oftentimes it's just looking through the applications that come into the department. We have a graduate admissions committee that goes through all of the applicants and sort of filters through them and comes up with a list of students that we're planning on admitting. So as faculty, we end up meeting with those students that come to visit or coming to email. I think that it's definitely a positive when a student is on the sort of proactive side. So I really like it when students email and they're organized, they send their CV, they're very clear about sort of what they want to do, or maybe what they know what I'm doing. So they've done their homework, they've gone to the website and maybe looked up some publications. So it's don't feel like as a student, like you're going to be bothering a faculty member, or you feel like, oh my God, they're so busy. I don't know if I want to email them, or, it's quite the contrary. I think if a student emails and if I don't respond, if I'm busy or traveling and they email again, that's like, okay, well, they're on the ball and they're certainly interested in my group. So I'll let Monique tell her perspective.
Yeah, I got most of the same things, excuse me, as Nick, but I guess it kind of depends on your field. So I know there's some conferences that have like poster sessions for students so they can interact with faculty. So I wish I had that in my field, but that could be a great opportunity. Sometimes students at Purdue, since we're really good at propulsion and there aren't many places they can get experience, they actually, a lot of professors hire people from Purdue because they know they're interested and have experience and stuff like that. But in general, kind of the email contact is what's expected. And it definitely helps to be very to the point, kind of like, oh, these are the things I'm interested in. I've looked through, either previous papers or your website, and these are the projects I'm interested in. Let's have a discussion about that. So I think all those things can help improve your odds of getting a response. But, some professors are busy, so don't take it personally. Just, hopefully try again, and hopefully you'll make some contact with them.
Yeah, and any questions that students have, feel free to drop them into the chat. And I guess a quick follow-up, it's like, okay, so you reach out via email, but then what? Like, what's your ask? Is your ask like a short meeting? is you're asked to be like, hey, I want to come work with you. Like, what's that next step, or what's the expectation on the faculty side for that next step after that email?
Yeah, I think for me, I will typically tell a student, hey, you have a great record, or, you know, I have an opening. I think that's probably the first thing. I was taught very early on. My dad is also a faculty member. He's retired now, but you know, he always impressed upon me that it doesn't matter who's emailing you, that you should always respond to them. And so I make it a point to always respond to whoever it is, from whatever part of the world they're from or where they're at, or doesn't matter what their position is. If somebody's inquiring to work in my group, I will always respond to them, even if I don't have an opening. So that's number one, is you know, I think, does the faculty member have an opening? And number two, again, you know, do they have the background? Have they done their homework? The background part is probably not even that important. I think as long as they have sort of the bare essentials, they've, you know, they have a good GPA, they have good recommendations, they've maybe published a paper or two, not a requirement, but you know, that sincerity has to come through, right? Not just I've cut and pasted this form email and dear XXX, you know, do you have an opening in your group? I've had students who have emailed me saying, you know, I love quantum physics, you know, I'd love to work for you. And I'm like, dude, I don't work on quantum physics. So sorry to disappoint you. Anyway.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. The only thing I'll add is I've also had some students like tell me what research I should do. Like, you should look into 3D printing nuclear stuff, which I definitely don't do either. So I think you really need to be thinking, you know, is this a good potential match with what exists, and like, you know, the skills you have? It doesn't have to be hard skills per se, like that match directly. It's more like, do I have a set of skills? Do I have the ability to learn? Do I have the ability to do research? I think that is what needs to come through in the email.
Great, thanks. We have a question in the chat from Marco. As it's kind of a little bit long, but I'll try and paraphrase. Feel free to read the whole thing. As someone who wants to get started on grant and proposal writing early in my graduate career, basically, how do I show that I'm interested in seeking grants and that I have my own potential funding sources in my application, graduate application? Especially if I already have an idea for, you know, how I want to continue in my PhD research. So I guess
Go ahead, Monique. I went first last time.
Well, I guess for me, like, grad students or undergrads don't usually write grants, but I mean, sometimes they apply for external fellowships like NSF and things like that early. So, I mean, actually, I think it's a good thing if you, I mean, I don't think it's required, honestly, but I think it's good if you show, hey, I'm serious. I'm trying to apply for these fellowships, because then that makes me think like, oh, you are taking this serious. You do want to have some sort of funding. You're not just putting it on me in a sense. So I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm not sure about this group, but I've come across a lot of undergrads who think that they need to come up with their own funding to go to grad school. You know, typically, if you're going for a PhD, you're going to be on a research assistantship, on a grant, and if you get a fellowship, you know, that's certainly a positive, but that's not a requirement to be admitted to the graduate program. Sometimes we will give out our own Purdue fellowships, but if you wanted to apply for an NSF or you know, a DoD fellowship, that's something that would happen, you know, maybe your first semester or something like that. So, so I think that's important. And I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was the rest of the question? Oh, grant writing, right?
And how do you show that in maybe your graduate application?
Yeah, I think grant writing is probably something that I would bring up after you've arrived and maybe you've kind of gotten to know your advisor a little bit better. I think that when you first start in your sort of graduate career, you're going to have a lot of things going on, just sort of getting used to taking classes, doing research, working with your advisor, getting to know your lab members, moving into a new city. Grant writing, there's time for that. So I would say maybe in your third or fourth year, when you become more senior, I think maybe that's a good time. Unless, again, as I think Monique mentioned, if you're going to be writing something for an NSF graduate fellowship, that counts as grant writing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend you can apply to the National Science Foundation, the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program, GRFP. You can apply to that in your senior year of undergrad. So if you have already done research, like literally now is the time to be writing that, to get that in. So, Marco, did you have another question?
No, I guess I just did want to clarify. It's not fellowship, it's actual grant proposal writing. Because one of the things, I work at NASA, and so we actually have access to internal grant and proposal mechanisms that we can write solicitations for. And I guess that's one of the things I'm really interested in kind of bringing into my research as well. And I guess I know you mentioned Professor Chawla just kind of pushing that off until the third and the fourth year. But if I'm familiar with the grant writing process, and I'm kind of familiar with how this mechanism works at NASA and how it can kind of overlap with my research, I guess what's a good way to kind of start that conversation with a potential advisor?
Well, I think that's a different situation. If you have a connection, let's say you're coming with a place like NASA, that would be a positive, because then you could say, hey, look, I have some personal connections here. I have experience with the folks here. I could write a grant proposal, and that could actually be even a little bit of a hook for the faculty members saying, hey, maybe we could write something together, and I could work as a, PhD student on that. We've had some kind of things like that, particularly students in industry, for example. They might say, hey, I was working with my manager to carve out a plan where I could do the PhD as well as do the research. And, when I was at ASU, Intel was, in our neighborhood. And so we used to do that a lot with our Intel, students. Yeah.
Yeah, and one quick thing I'll say is when you start in a graduate program, more and more nowadays we're encouraging you to do an IDP, or an individual development plan, and kind of sit down with your advisor and kind of discuss what are your goals, how do you want to grow professionally, and that's something that you could certainly bring up to them in conversation. So cool. So another question in the chat, are there professors purely looking for PhD students, or are all open to master's thesis students as well? I guess.
I guess sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
No. I was giving it to you.
Okay. Yeah. So it kind of depends on the professor, the stage they're at, the funding they get. There's some professors who are very good at getting industry funding, and they have enough funding for master's students. There's some early career professors like myself where we need to have some PhD students graduate by the time we go for tenure. So we're probably more likely to select PhD students. It doesn't mean you can't have some master's students, but it's really very dependent on the type of funding and kind of the career stage, I think, and personal preference even. So.
Yeah, I think I'll be perfectly honest. I think that for most assistantships where a professor has an existing grant or a new grant, those grants are typically 3 to 4 years in duration. So, you think about it from the faculty member's point of view. Would you rather take a master's student who's going to leave in 2 years, or would you rather have a PhD student who's going to be there for 4 years, and once you train them, they're going to be around for a fairly nice, solid period of time? So for a lot of those, I would say NSF, DoD type of longer term grants, faculty member will prefer a PhD student. Now, as Monique said, for industry students or students who come with their own funding, or maybe you have a shorter term project, hey, master student is great, is perfect, so and I've had master students who came in and said, I don't want to do a PhD, I want to leave, I want to make money. And then after the second year, they're like, I kind of like this PhD stuff. Is there any way I can hang around for another 2 more years? So it happens.
Feel free to keep dropping questions in the chat. I'm going to ask one now. When we think about kind of meetings between either undergraduate students with faculty members or, prospective graduate students, like you just applied for a PhD program and you're interviewing, like what happens during those meetings between prospective students and faculty members? And, I'll just quickly put this in the context of like, when I started undergrad research, like my faculty member, I did good in his lab. He came up to me and said, hey, will you do research with me? And I said, sure. And that's how I got my undergrad research gig, right? And then for grad school, what I remember like being at a PhD interview and like one of the professors like had their dog, right? And I'm sitting there like awkwardly petting their dog while answering research like questions. So like, there's a whole spectrum of like weird things that can happen and what you should talk about, what you shouldn't talk about. When you're kind of engaging or having that discussion with prospective or with faculty who you're interested in working with or a future advisor. I guess, what happens during those meetings? Like, what is the expectation that you have kind of for the students? Like or I guess, like, how does that whole process go?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jackie. And it's something that as head of our graduate program, we go over in our orientation for new graduate students. It's really it's almost like a little bit of an interview, but don't feel like the faculty member is interviewing you. You should be interviewing the faculty member as well, okay? Because some things that you should be asking are, sort of what are your expectations? How often do you typically meet with your students? Do you typically take your students to a conference every year? Will I get to work on things that are outside of my dissertation? And of course, you should, not feel uncomfortable by asking them, hey, is there somebody in your group that I can talk to? And perfectly normal. Okay, so this has to be a good fit for both sides, and you want to make sure that your styles, your expectations, they match well. So the only thing where that kind of goes wrong is where sometimes a student will come in and be like, so what am I going to be working on, Chief? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's you don't want to come in with that kind of attitude. So
yeah, I'll just say really emphasize that fit is probably one of the most important things for you getting through your degree. So many people like drop out or leave or switch advisors because it's just not a good professional relationship, right? And it's not that the advisor's bad or the student's bad. It's just it's not a match. So that's one of the most important things to ask about. I would also say another question you should think about is what kinds of jobs do students in your group get? Because some people want to just work, at a particular type of company. Some people want to work at national labs, and some want to go to academia. So if you work for someone who just produces industry students and you want to go to academia, that is not a good route because you will not get what you need for your CV when you're interviewing. But if you're not sure, that's fine too. It's probably good to get like someone who has a mixture of connections.
Yeah, I will say Jackie mentioned a little bit of a uncomfortable experience she had. Sometimes there will be a situation where you're sitting in the room with another graduate student, and so then it's kind of like there's a little bit of that competitive thing going on. And so at our last recruiting visit, I had two prospective students, and they sort of started kind of one-upping each other. It was a little bit interesting, but hopefully you won't have that situation. I will say that at Purdue, at least in MSc, I don't know about other departments, but we will typically admit our students and not do the matching process until you actually get to campus. And the reason is that we want you to get comfortable. We want you to meet with the faculty. And not feel like, you know, I have a day and a half on campus. I need to make a decision on who I'm going to work for. And somebody told me a story about Penn State, where in Penn State, you have to make a decision right there and then, at least in materials. And so they had students who had, you know, times and so one of the students was actually very clever and told the other 3 students who were competing with him for a particular spot in a faculty member's lab, and told the other guys, hey, I heard he's not taking anybody, so you guys, you know, should really not waste your time. And he was the only one who ended up meeting with the faculty member and got the role. So that's Penn State. That's not Purdue. It's not Purdue.
Do your
Just
own
saying.
research. That's what I'm hearing. Go talk to people. Yeah.
So,
Communication is key in that point. And very quickly, I'll be real with all of you guys. I had 3 grad school interviews. I blew my first one because I imposter syndromed myself the moment I got to campus. The very first, you know, thing at like breakfast meeting, I sat down and I was talking with everyone, and everyone was a technician or had worked at that university. And I was like the oddball. I was the undergrad coming straight out, and I was like, oh God, am I good enough for here? And so I set, like, literally the whole day, I was like comparing myself to someone else. So don't do that. If you receive an interview for a PhD program, they saw something in your application. So do not imposter syndrome yourself on that interview process. Like, you are good enough to be there. There's a reason why you are invited to campus. So, so that's learn from my troubles. So, okay. So a couple questions in the chat. What advice would you give to students who don't have a very high GPA, but are really interested in doing research? And I guess extending that a little bit, like connecting that to how do you network and meet faculty? Like, how do you stand out? You maybe have a low GPA. And I think the next question is maybe if you, or if you have little to no research experience before, but you're really passionate.
Monique, you want me to take that, or you wanted to address that one?
Well, I guess for myself, I tend to look for, you know, these processes are very multifaceted. So, you know, it helps to have research experience. You know, your GPA doesn't necessarily have to be 4.0, but, you know, it helps to have some sort of experience. For me, I know not everyone has research experience. So if I at least see some sort of internship experience, that's something I will think about, because that shows you worked on something and been responsible for it. Another thing. So project-based organization. So like, for example, AIAA, like people build like a plane, or I did like a rocket club. So people build a rocket. There's SAE, right? So if you have things like that where you built something, that can also be beneficial to put on your application to show like, I've been responsible for this part, or I led this team. So I would highlight that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Very cool. So the kind of next question, I think you kind of touched upon it with the project-based. If so, what stood out about them that you're convinced to take them? If not, what do you recommend that they do to stand out from other applicants? I think you addressed that with kind of the project-based work. And I think also, you know, if you can strengthen your application by having letters of recommendation by faculty who have seen you do those projects, I think that can also help.
And I think with the letters of recommendation, you know, those, I put a lot of weight on those because, you know, and sometimes students make the mistake of maybe going after a very famous professor who maybe they don't know very well. And I would say that you're better off getting a really solid, very thorough letter that really talks about all of your really good, positive qualities, and who maybe is not, you know, the most famous person in the world. Because the more detail there is in a letter, the more the letter writer can expand on what you will bring to the role, I think is extremely important. So.
Mhm. Excellent. And I know, so Brian and Ruben, if I didn't touch upon your questions as fully as you would like, then feel free to unmute and ask a little bit more about that, or throw up your hand. So I guess my next question is mentoring. So, okay, you meet a faculty member and they seem like a good fit. Our students probably want to have the discussion of, you know, what is the mentoring style of that faculty member? So I guess, you know, can you maybe talk a little bit more about your mentoring style, and then maybe provide some advice about how students can learn or gauge whether, you know, a research group would be kind of an inclusive space that they can thrive in as a graduate student?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, great point, actually. So I typically tell students, you know, my style, I would like to think that it's a very supportive style. I'm not a micromanager. You know, there are faculty out there who are in the lab every day and who are looking over your shoulder and saying, you know, I don't think you're doing that right. And I'm not that person. So I meet with students once a week. I have a group meeting once a month. Typically after that group meeting, we will go out to lunch. I will pay for that lunch. And, you know, because I think it's important to know your students on a personal level as well. I'll tell you all a story. I've had a student who's been with me for over a year, and my students will typically send me a very short PowerPoint update, 3 to 4 slides the day before I meet. And I like to get that the day before because I can kind of go over it and look through it before I meet with them. And he said, you know, Professor, the last meeting you mentioned the movie Amadeus, and I don't know why I mentioned that. We're talking about something else. But he said, you know, I used to be a really good pianist when I was in high school. And he sent me a link, a YouTube link to this recital he had played, and I had no idea that you know, that he used to play the piano. And so, you know, so those kinds of things are very interesting to me, to know my students as outside of their research and outside of their, you know, their role as a PhD student. So.
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand like what's expected of you. So again, in the interviews, you can ask these questions, right? Like, how often do you meet with people? Are there team meetings? Do you expect me to work with others and all that stuff? For me, I think most of the things are kind of similar to what Nick said, but for individual meetings with my students, I have them send me just like a short update about what they want to talk about before the meeting, so I know like what I need to look at before, because sometimes they want to discuss like a paper or something I haven't seen in a long time or something. So I find that really helpful. And this might seem kind of harsh, but I do it for myself. But if I don't hear that update by a certain time, I cancel the meeting. And I do that because, you know, it's important for the students to come prepared, I think, and it's also important for the faculty to not be sitting there wondering if you're coming. But these are things you should discuss with faculty up front, because some people might not like that, but some might be like, no, that keeps me on top of myself. Yeah, other than that, I do sometimes in my team meetings, we have like tutorials, like how do you use the software? How do you write an abstract? Or things like that. And I think they find that really helpful. But everyone has their own style, and it's totally okay to ask about those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that you know, you should also see if you can find a mentor who is going to care more than just your productivity in the lab. You know, that they're going to think about your future career. You know, are they going to help you maybe with some contacts when you're looking for a job? Are they going to write that letter for that fellowship that you're interested in? those kinds of things I think are very important in really supporting, our students. And the student faculty relationship is a very, very special relationship. It's something that really cannot be replicated in any other environment, really, that student mentor relationship, and it carries on for the rest of your life. I was invited to give a talk at my postdoctoral mentor's sort of honorary symposium because he was retiring, and there was just this rush of all these wonderful memories I had with him, and having coffee and discussing things. Or Jackie probably remembers this, but there was a thing called a Palm Pilot, which was sort of the predecessor to the smartphone. And my first day on the job, my postdoctoral advisor gave me a Palm Pilot, which weren't cheap in those days. So those little things. And boy, was I nervous when I gave that talk. You're sitting in the front row. Hadn't been that nervous in a long time. But
And there's a kind of a follow-up question in the chat about, could you talk a little bit more about the size of your research groups and how the size affects the group and the style of working? And maybe like talking through like who is in it, like undergrads, grads, postdocs, if you have any research scientists, like what that spread looks like as well for who's in your group. Maybe we'll start with Monique.
Okay, I'll go. So right now I have 4 grad students, and I have, well, some of them are on fellowship, so that helps a lot. And then I've had varying numbers of undergrad students. So I don't even know how many, maybe like 6-ish right now. And I have no postdocs. So there are times it is a lot for me to handle. So I definitely had to kind of change how I manage or how I interact with people. But at least everyone at least gets like some sort of subgroup meeting where we can all discuss what's going on with the project. And definitely my grad students all get meetings with me. But in general, the size of the group is very important. I've been in a large research group where you have like almost 30 grad students. So you don't get a lot of attention, especially if there aren't postdocs or research staff, or very few of them. So I find like in those groups, although there's tends to be a lot of resources because the PI is really good at getting funding, you may not always get that one-on-one mentorship, or you might get it for certain things. Like you might get it for the job hunt, but maybe not on how to do this research experiment, right? So that was my experience in a large group. And as far as running my small group, I can have more interaction with my students right now, but I anticipate that will change if the group grows much more. So
yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of benefits to a smaller group. My group size is a little bit larger than I would like it to be right now. I have 2 postdocs and 10 to 11 graduate students. Some of them are visiting, but I have 3 graduate students that are graduating next spring. So so we should probably get into a little bit more manageable size. And so I agree with everything Monique said. I think it's important to have that one-on-one, contact and attention. I know of colleagues in my field, not necessarily at Purdue, who have groups of 50 people or 70 people, and that's not a research group, that's a company. I mean, that's and so in my group, I typically have either a senior student or a postdoc kind of shadow the graduate student the first year, and they will attend the one-on-one meetings and just kind of help to bridge the gap a little bit. I find that helps a lot. It's sometimes hard at the end of that first year to wean the postdoc out, but we do cut the cord at some point. So but yeah, I think size of research group, but I think more importantly, the style of mentorship and making sure that you're getting the proper attention. I think that's very important. And by the way, these very famous groups who have many students. When we interview them for faculty positions, and we made this mistake more than once, we're like, oh, well, this person comes from this such famous group, blah, blah, blah. Well, remember that there's like, 30 graduate students in that group, and there is a top, a median, and a bottom in that distribution. So oftentimes we will get sort of the bottom students, and it's only when they give their research talk that they talk about all these wonderful generalities and everything is a quad chart and there's absolutely no detail, because in those kinds of group there is one person who's technician A and there's one person who's technician B, and they run an instrument. They don't really think so much about, so they may have 10 or 15 journal papers where they're co-author number 15, but that's because they're running a piece of equipment that is useful for everyone. So, different strokes for different people, I guess.
Yeah, and certainly if you're looking at a larger research group for graduate school, like having this conversation about how am I going to get mentorship? How am I not just going to be a number in this group? I think that's a really important thing to have. So important question to ask. Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions real fast. So we're going to lightning round this one from Fernando. What do you recommend for students to build a closer relationship with their advisor? Like, how do you get more personal without like being really awkward about it or making anything kind of uncomfortable? How do you build that relationship between a faculty member and new graduate student?
I think a lot of it, a lot of it is trust. A lot of it is just time. But I would also say try to connect on a level that's maybe not necessarily just research focused. Maybe you can talk about something that you're both interested in, or go get a cup of coffee together, when you're not in the lab so much, or maybe you're not in the faculty member's office. That sort of breaks down barriers at times.
Yeah, actually this past summer, my students were just hanging out in the lab, and it's a very depressing gray slab wall lab and everything. And I realized I'm like, they don't know how to socialize with each other. So, I also took them out to lunch. I'm like, let's go, like, have a lunch, have a little bit of fun. And like, hopefully they'll kind of build that up themselves. But in general, as far as like interactions with me, it's, beyond the research, like, well, I guess it's related to research, but since I have new grad students, I kind of keep them in the loop on things I'm thinking of proposing. So they have the opportunity to kind of feel involved with that. Cause I feel like some PIs are just like, I put something together, but I'm not telling you what I promised people to do. So you have to do it, but you don't know what that is. So I try to involve people in that so they kind of have more of a voice and like they can contribute more and feel more like a team. So.
Awesome advice. And then we'll end on why did you decide to become a faculty member?
I'll just tell a quick story. So again, my dad is a faculty member in material science and engineering, and never really put a gun to my head or forced me to do things, but there were sort of it was what do they call it? This sort of we would go to his lab, my sister and I. We'd give our practice presentations in the conference room. He would sit in the back with his watch and he would critique us at the end. It's just we were very much exposed to that faculty academic environment, and you're exposed to your in my case, my dad sort of mentoring graduate students, and he got to wear sneakers to work, and he kind of had his own little schedule and used to work on interesting problems. Like, this is not a bad lifestyle, and in many ways it helped us to bond on so many different levels, I think. And even to this day, I visited my parents this weekend, and my wife and my mom just get exasperated when we start talking shop because, we're using all this different lingo and we're talking about other people in the field. And did you know this person became a department head at this place? No way, So anyway.
Cool. Yeah, I think for me, like, I was always interested in research, but I didn't really have a justification for getting a PhD at the time. So I was doing like, undergrad research things, gotten to some programs. But I think for me, I attribute it to like a female faculty member that I talked to at another university. And, I think she kind of convinced me, like, if I pick something I really like to do, then yeah, I mean, you can do the PhD and, like get the enjoyment out of it rather than just like a short master's. So I think that for me was like kind of a catalyst to think about, oh, well, if I can get a PhD in like rocketry, for example, which is what I wanted to do at the time, I'm like, sure, why not do that? Why not apply to that place? But I think over time, it wasn't just that. It was also, I really like the flexibility of the job. Like you have to be a go-getter and pick what you want to go after. I like the mentorship a lot. Like that's really important to me. And even with teaching, I think like the mentorship part, like when people talk to me one-on-one, I really like that. And I don't know, maybe I'm egotistical, but I always thought I could teach better than some of my professors. So like they were just like, theory, chalkboard. And I'm like, I think I could explain that better. So it's a mix of things for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I would say at Purdue, it's over the last couple of years, we've actually developed a whole club called the Engineering Academic Career Club. And Nick actually has served as a mentor in that for our graduate students who are interested in becoming a faculty and postdocs who are interested in becoming a faculty member. So shameless plug that, like, we don't all have parents like Nick who are faculty members. My dad was a plumber, so, everyone has a different path in academia. And I like the career club, academic career club, because because it allows you to build that community if you don't have it. It allows you to kind of network and connect with others. And if you do have it, it still allows you to build that community and connect with others. So shameless.
By the way, that is the Grade Club. I've done it for 2 years, and Jackie does an amazing job organizing that. So, good job, Jackie.
It's kind of like being on the other side. Like it's like kind of like GradTrack, but with an academic lens. So shameless plug on that. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we will give our fabulous speakers a virtual round of applause. And thank you again, Monique and Nick, for sharing your time and your experiences today with our undergraduate students who are interested in grad school. So big thanks, and I will dismiss you guys, Monique and Nick, and then we are going to jump into a quick presentation about assignments, and then we'll bust out into our breakout rooms for mentoring circles. So
yeah.
But
thank you. And I'll just put my email in the chat. If anybody has any follow-ups, please feel free. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you as well.
Thanks,
and
everybody.
I also email there. So
That's great. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Perfect. Thanks. Okie dokie. So we are going to quickly do assignment description and wrap up, and then we'll move into our circles. And before we jump into assignment description, I wanted to quickly copy paste our action pack up, because we only have 3 meetings left, guys. So this semester is flying. This program is flying. Our next meeting is next week, where all of the senior students will be coming to visit campus through the Graduate Diversity Visitation Program. Anyone who's graduating after 2024 or after, we are still going to have our virtual GradTrack meeting. We will be discussing the summer research experience, like talking about, why that versus industry or an industry internship, and, really how can you be competitive for summer research, and how can you just get a better understanding of that process. So that will be next week. I'm really excited. It'll be a great session. And then we'll meet twice in November. Our last 2 meetings, November 7th and November 14th. This will be speed advice sessions from our GradTrack mentors. GradTrack mentors, I have a couple updates for you guys at the end of this presentation as well, just to make sure we're all on the same page. But this will be exciting because these 2 sessions are topics that our undergraduate GradTrack scholars picked out through the mid-program survey. So we're pulling out all of the topics you said that you wanted to hear from, and our GradTrack mentors are going to give 2-minute pieces of advice and experience based off of those different topics. So very, very excited about that. We are meeting, like I said, next week. Kind of the actions for next week revolve mostly around your LinkedIn profile. So hopefully doesn't take too much time. So definitely take a moment to look at your LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn, just make an account, start filling some stuff out in there. You can add GradTrack Scholars as kind of a recognition award honor on there that you were selected for this program. So make sure you're doing that. And then we're going to start a quick post in the general Microsoft Teams channel. So feel free to share that there, your LinkedIn. If you're having issues accessing your teams or accessing Teams, then please feel free to send your LinkedIn to Lexi or one of your mentors, and that'll get posted on there. Feel free also to connect with Monique and Nick on LinkedIn. They're always posting fun things. And if you want to start thinking a little bit more about your statement of purpose or your essay for summer research in your resume, if you got some feedback from your mentors, definitely feel free to resubmit a new one. You can get GradTrack trophy points for that. And so before Monday, I know a number of you guys are coming to Purdue's campus, the Graduate Diversity Visitation Program. I'd encourage you, some of you guys maybe have already gotten your schedules for meetings. If not, then they should be coming soon. So I encourage you to, you probably got scheduled with some faculty, reach out to them, say that you're really excited to meet with them, send them a quick email. And if you're an younger undergraduate student who's looking for summer research or just kind of looking at faculty, feel free to start reaching out to faculty as well at Purdue, maybe to discuss summer research or other opportunities. And hopefully you guys have already started looking at application fee waivers, but remember that those do exist. So feel free to post those. And hopefully we talked a little bit about like what questions you should be asking faculty members during this session. So and like Professor Chawla said, campus interviews are a two-way street. You should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So prep some questions, drop them in your teams, and start a conversation with your circle about what questions you can't be asking or what questions you might want to ask while you're on campus or while you're having that Zoom interview with a faculty member for grad school or summer research. Okay, some quick mentor announcements. So mentors, please make sure you're tuned in. We are moving forward with our GradTrack t-shirts. Those are getting ordered tomorrow. So if you have not sent your t-shirt size, mentors only, we have all the undergrad GradTrack scholars. Please send GradTrack mentors, please send your t-shirt size to Lexi if you'd like a t-shirt. And then as I indicated, November sessions, we're doing speed advice. So Lexi will be sending out some information about that, about how to choose what topic you want to discuss. Remember, please, mentors, to review mentee documents, the statements, as well as resume, and provide some feedback. Mentees, if you're still waiting on your mentors, follow up with them, give them a gentle poke via email or via Microsoft Teams to let them know that you're waiting and just to follow up to see if they received your documents for that feedback. And then I really encourage you, as we're wrapping up this program, the last month and a half or so, schedule some more meetings with your mentors, talk through the different things that you're navigating right now in your undergraduate studies and as you're thinking about your next step. And then mentors, we will be celebrating the end of our program at the Bryant on November 17th. So calendar invites will be coming out soon. So with that, we're going to bump into our circles. I know that one of your actions for today was to just kind of briefly do your elevator pitch, and I draft that up. So feel free to kind of go around and just give a quick elevator pitch, and then debrief on your resume and CV, and then kind of discuss and debrief on today's discussion as well. And then at the very end at 8:30, you are more than welcome to depart straight from your mentoring circle breakout room. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Any questions? No, all pretty crystal clear? Yeah, I am very excited to see some of you guys on campus next week. So, and like I said, if you're at SWE, Society of Women Engineers, at the end of this week, or SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, next week, like come visit me. I'll be at our booth, and we're running a whole bunch of workshops at SHIP. So, so with that, I'll let Lexi do some breakout rooms, and I will drop the to-dos in the channel or in the chat. So that's your kind of your schedule for today. And we should also have, if you don't know what you're talking about or don't know what the elevator pitch is, then definitely check Teams. There should be a document on there. So enjoy. Thanks, guys. Let me know if you